I recently sat down with Jeffrey Smith and Jen Agosta from Discogs to talk about the variety of reasons why people collect records and the deep connection they have with their collection. We will discuss on this episode of the Discogs Insider. My name is G.I. Sanders from NTX Vinyl, and I am excited to be here with another episode of the Discogs Insider. I sat down with Jeffrey Smith, the VP of Marketing at Discogs, and Jen Agosta, the Brand Director at Discogs, to talk about our collections and the connection we have with them. It was a great discussion. I hope you enjoy it. Here it is. Jeff, Jen, it's so great to have you guys here to talk about your record collections on the second episode of the Discogs Insider. I'm really excited to kind of unpack the different styles of collections and how you guys see people using Discogs as more of a utility, as less of a utility, and more of a way to really form a deeper connection with record collection, which is kind of what we're here to talk about today. Jeff, I want to start off with you. First and foremost, like, how long have you been collecting records?
I kind of got back into it when, what everybody considers the resurgence started happening around 2010, 2011.
Okay.
I went off the deep end and started collecting Jeff Buckley records, right? I was a huge fan, still am, right? And took my basic fandom to another level and kind of jumped back into vinyl at that point.
Awesome. Jen, and you?
Yeah, I started collecting records in the late 90s as a teenager because I worked at a record store. And so it was always like one of my paychecks always went to buying records. And there was a Ticketmaster in there. So the other thing was lots of concert tickets. But that's really what started my record collecting. At the time, it was like CDs and cassettes, but they sold vinyl too. We sold vinyl. And so that was the thing that got me started. And in 2006, I sold off my record collection. I ended up doing some traveling for work and offloaded it. And since it's been about probably 4 years now that I've started buying my collection back again. So that's been interesting to see the things that I want to have that I had before. Those are kind of the first things. It's such a part of my youth music identity that I wanted to kind of have back again. And then the new things, like my new relationship to records and what it is that I decide to buy and what I decide not to buy is interesting, especially working at Discogs and seeing our own audience making those decisions as well.
Awesome. Well, I think it's a really fun topic, and we're going to get into it around the different types of collectors, because there's a lot of different reasons to collect. There are a lot of different ways to collect, especially these days as the resurgence has come back. You've got people who collected, 20, 30, 40 years ago, and that's a completely different style of collecting than a lot of people who are just buying now. And so I want to get into those different types of collections, different types of collectors. And I also really want to drill in on, again, that surface level usage of Discogs, which is, I think, how most people see it. But for me, I know I couldn't live without Discogs. And I have learned so much more about my collection from using the app. And so I think that's the piece that's so valuable, especially for people who are newer to the hobby and newer to Discogs. Is that something, Jeff, that you guys really key in on from a marketing perspective when you're thinking about your user base and how they go about using the app?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, when we're looking at music discovery and just record collecting as a whole, it's like we want to meet people where they are and meet them with the type of collector that they are. So Jen's done an excellent job talking about the different types of personas, like audience personas that we have. And they're everything from the audiophile to the eclectic to the visualist. Like naming those types of collectors and creating content, creating opportunity for us to engage with them and bring them deeper into the platform, really, when it comes to it. Because, coming in, and if you've got a small collection, from a small collection to a large collection, we want to take that and try to determine who it is that you are, so that we can really get to a point where you're seeing yourself and how you're using the platform, and like a lot of self-identity work there too. Does that sound right, Jen?
Yeah, I can add a little bit of color to that too. And it's interesting to hear you talk about it as a utility, because its usefulness is something that people talk about a lot. We do a lot of surveys with our audience. We hear a lot from them, and a lot of what they say is Discogs is essential for record collecting. They kind of wouldn't know what to do without it. Keeps people organized and keeps people from buying duplicates. And whether you're hunting out at a record store or looking online, that Discogs is kind of that constant companion for research and things like that. And I think that, one of the great things about Discogs is that, as Jeffrey noted, it's a little bit different for everyone. It's like, it's a tool that can be used very lightly, whether it's just looking up a version of something, or finding some information, or finding the value of a record. And it's something that you can grow with as a collector as well, like starting to catalog your collection, see the value of what you have, seeing how those titles that you own connect to the rest of the world of music. Like, that dynamic, interconnected discography is so powerful. And seeing what you have that other people have too, it's very inspiring. So, the fact that you can use Discogs as a light level, if you just want to buy a record, or look up some information, or really start to kind of grow into it, there's so much room for growth for collectors of any level of experience or interest.
Yeah, I talk with people on a daily basis, obviously owning a record shop and doing and having a large presence online. I talk with so many people who are not only familiar with the app, they use the app from a cataloging standpoint, because I think that's, at least from my perspective, the number one kind of entry point. And for a lot of people, it stops there, and that's really where I'm always trying to encourage people and push people, like, go further, because there's so much to learn. And I think it only takes one instance. It only takes one instance of someone saying, "Oh, I had no idea that existed," or, "Oh, I had no idea there was this pressing of that album," that type of thing. And then they realize, like, "Oh, this is a rat hole. Like, this is an encyclopedia of music." And again, from my perspective, having used Discogs for so many years with my personal collection, and now from a business standpoint, that education has just been absolutely invaluable. And it's one of the things, again, why I was so excited to partner with you guys to do this video series, just because it's an opportunity for me to learn more about what you guys do, which is awesome. But it just keeps me engaged with the app as well, and continuing to dig deeper in those types of things. And so, as I deal with all those record collectors and converse with all those people, the differences in their collecting styles, which gets into the kind of archetypes of why people collect, I think that's really interesting, because it really does run the gamut, from people who are just starting to do this, from people who have been doing it for 50 years. And so there's a lot of different, again, styles. There's a lot of different ways to collect, whether it's like, hey, do you want to preserve history? Are you just looking to play this record on Sunday mornings on your cheap turntable? Like, that's fine too. You can find joy in this hobby in a lot of different places. And so I think that's kind of circling back to your collection specifically, Jeff, like what really brings you joy when you talk about, to someone who doesn't collect, maybe friend or casual acquaintance, when they learn you collect records, regardless of your profession, like how do you explain your collecting habits, your collecting mentality to people when they learn about, the fact that you're a collector?
Yeah, it really comes back around the musical identity for me. It's not necessarily about collecting records, it's about the music, right? And
Amen.
the importance of music to me and how I see myself. It's I was just talking earlier today. It's like my record collection really is a reflection of who I am. And it's not only who I am today, but who I was when I was a teenager or when I was 30 or when I was single. Now that I'm married, what that is, right? And there are all kinds of pieces of music in my record collection that mean something, that speak to a certain time, place, right? And it really becomes a conversation about that. And I think you can learn a whole lot about another person through the music they listen to, what they're connecting with, and what that deeper connection that they have with a certain artist or a certain style, those kind of things. And it's really comes down to that. And it's amazing the conversations that you can have when you can connect to someone at that level.
Absolutely. And Jen, how about you? Like, what's when when you're talking to someone who had no idea you collect records? Like, what's their impression, and how do you kind of explain that to people?
Yeah, for me, it's not necessarily about my collection as a whole as much as it is what is in it. And so I think about and that's the thing about how everyone's connection or collection is like a unique fingerprint of who they are, right? It really
Hmm.
does encapsulate the snapshots of that person's life through soundtracks um and for me personally, when I look through my records, it's kind of like looking through old photographs. Like, I can pick out any
Sure.
record on my shelf, and I know when I bought it. I know where I got it. There's a story to it. My partner and I, every show we go to, we buy the record. It's kind of like keeping the ticket stub.
Yeah.
It's that, yeah, it's that deeper level of engagement. I have some records that are from my childhood. I'll never listen to them again, but they mean a lot to me because of that context. And so it really, like, to me, it's like a collection of it's a collection of memories and identity, like music that really is the music that is defines who I am, through all parts of my life, like Jeffrey said. And so I think, when somebody looks at my record collection, they can look at essentially a snapshot of who I am through many phases of my life, which is part of why in rebuilding my record collection, I'm rebuying records that I used to have, because there are things that are kind of timeless in my life and in defining who I am. And I will say too that when we asked our audience this, what does your record collection mean to you? And there were like 50,000 people who responded to this survey. Identity, it's who I am, it's my life, it's me. That's what we heard over and over again, and which is so awesome. And it was a global survey, and you translate it back into English for me to read, and it's universal. That's what everybody feels, which is really, really beautiful to see that common thread.
Yeah, I think that level of commitment for me is a big thing that, again, a lot of people outside the hobby don't understand, because when I'm making the choice to buy a record, not only am I spending good money on it, to me personally, just like it sounds to you guys, it's a representation of who I am. I'm choosing to take up shelf space, which is limited. Just like budget is limited, so is space. And so it's a whole different decision versus like just scrolling through your phone and going, "Oh, this looks kind of fun. I'll check that out." Like that's a completely different thing. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. That's a great way to discover music as well. But the level of commitment of going, yeah, this represents me. Like, I actually want to own this. I want to spend $40 on it, and I want to have it with me the rest of my life, or until something happens and I have to get rid of it. Like, that's a mentality that, that again, it's a collector's mentality. But to your point, Jeff, it's very much
Mm.
rooted in the music, because it's physical and you can hold it and touch it, but it's more about when you play it. And then that's where the true identity piece comes in. It's like, oh yeah, I would love to share this with someone. I would love for someone to know that I appreciate this. Like, that's a really, really key component.
Yeah, I think we're constantly kind of curating ourselves through our record collection. At least that's how I perceive it. There are some things that I'm not listening to a lot anymore, and I might choose to prune and get
Yeah,
rid of or sell on Discogs, right?
always.
And but it's always replaced by something else. It's like there's always something that fills that gap somewhere.
Hmm.
So, um, yeah, it's interesting. It's, again, kind of going back to the self identity piece of it. It's, you'll know who I am by going through my records. And I know that I see Jen in the records that, we talk about while we're, working in this space. It's like we're constantly kind of throwing music recs back at each other. And, I feel like I know Jen better because of that. And I apply that to anyone that I kind of share music with. It's like you get to know them and then you start creating this kind of communal experience. And that really comes back to what Discogs is this giant community of record collectors that are sharing with each other through the forums and across social, not only music recommendations, but just like how to take care of records,
Yeah,
turning each other on to some of the ways to use Discogs that are kind of like if moments, right? And so it's interesting to watch all that happen across the platform, and ultimately comes back to it's kind of Jen and my job and the marketing team's job to make sure that everybody's aware of beyond collection, like all the tools that you can use, like the want list and the use of list for music discovery. Like we have all these users that have made these great lists of music that are just insanely deep, and there's so much discovery to be had amongst those things, and surfacing those things up for the community is incredibly important too.
You mentioned lists. One of the things that is so cool about list making is that you can have public lists and private lists, and they're so creative. Like people do create their own curated lists of things and they share them, and they're visible. You can see, a particular record you like, and you can see every list that it's on. And
that's
there's
really
some
cool.
really cool lists that people have. Some of them are about music and some of them are just funny, like, lists of record covers or records that have cats on the cover or something like that.
Sure.
Really funny things, and it's full of personalities. Really, it's really creative. And then there's more useful lists. Jeffrey, what was the list that you had mentioned before?
Oh yeah, there was I mentioned in another conversation about there was a user that documented the entire Detroit house music scene, like in
Wow.
chronological order. It was so accurate and deep that some of the music media in Detroit, I think even the Detroit Daily Paper had written an article about like there was a user on Discogs that chronicled the history of house music in Detroit. So it's insane that someone would take the time to do that, which is great, but also that Discogs is a place that you can do that,
Yeah,
that you have a home here and you can express yourself in that way too. Not only that's not expressing yourself through your record collection, that's expressing that I care enough about this music scene from the city that I live in to take the time to record by record ex- like describe that musical history of that scene in great detail. It's just I said insane, but it's like inspiring, really, that
sure.
that
Yeah, yeah.
that someone cares that much to do that and that are using Discogs to do that. It's amazing.
Yeah, that mindset of preservation from a historical standpoint, and Discogs acting as the platform where you can actually facilitate it, that it amazes me too, because I'm not that person. Like I love what I love, it's on my shelf, but the people who really get down to work and do the work from a submission standpoint, and then obviously from a curation and list making standpoint, that stuff always really impresses me because I'm not that guy, but I appreciate wholeheartedly the people who do put the time in, because yeah, that's a hobby in itself, making sure that all of these releases, whether it be from a certain scene, city, genre, are actually represented, you know, and that's again part of the education that has afforded me so much over the years as I've gotten into the business side of records, is understanding what's out there. And I think that's, again, beyond that surface level of what a lot of people think of Discogs. So a lot of people think, oh, I'm just going to put my couple hundred records in here and I'm done. And it's like, that's the tip of the iceberg. Is that pretty typical, Jen, of a user that you guys think who gets started? Like, what do you guys see from a typical user, and where do you hope to take them on their kind of journey with Discogs?
Yeah, I think the entry point for users, there's kind of two entry point or three really. You mentioned information, research. People find Discogs because they're looking for something. Sometimes they're looking for information. Sometimes they're looking for a record that they're have been hunting for to purchase. Um, and and sometimes the entry point is that they hear from somebody, did you know you can catalog your collection in Discogs, and you can even see what the value of your collection is? And sometimes that's the thing that gets people to sink their teeth in. And so it's a little bit different for different people, but there are different points of entry. Some people they want to sell. We hear from a lot of people. They've just inherited a record collection and they want to sell it off, and that's their entry point. So,
Sure.
so there's really a lot of different entry points. But what we really would love, our goal is to have people use Discogs in a like fully, to really fully use all of the tools, or at least a handful of the tools, because the more tools you use, because they're all integrated, it's the integration of the discography database, the marketplace, the value and collection stats, like all of these things integrated together, plus the fact that the discography is dynamic, it's continuously growing and changing thanks to the community of contributors that keep growing it. It is that integration that really makes it so powerful. And so, the more that people get engaged with the platform as a whole, the more they really get out of it. And one of those, to go back to what you had mentioned earlier about collection and adding things to your collection, having your collection catalogs opens up a whole new world of things. Not only seeing the value of your collection, what you have, but you can also start to see who else owns the same things you have. There's a lot of like opportunity to kind of explore Discogs in a new way and use your collection as new pathways of discovery. So yeah, the more the merrier when it comes to getting deep into the use of the platform.
Yeah, and I think, and you mentioned this earlier, Jeff, the other piece, which you were just alluding to, Jen, is the cross-pollination and the community aspect. I think is so huge, whether you're talking about just reviews and ratings on specific pressings or notes, or obviously in the forums and how it kind of bleeds over into social media and that type of thing. That aspect of this hobby, the community aspect, I have found to just be absolutely invaluable. Interacting with other collectors and learning from them has been just huge. And again, I think that's another thing that Discogs really, really assists on, because it's kind of the backbone. Because 9 times out of 10, when someone has a question about a record, where are you going to check that? You're going to Discogs to confirm that information, what year it was, how many colors it's available on, who produced it, whatever it may be. So I know that community aspect is big for you guys. Is that something that's going to continue to be on the forefront of, especially from a marketing standpoint? Is that big for you guys, Jeff, the community aspect and what that means?
Yeah, the community has empowered all of this. Right. Discogs is like a singular destination where you can experience all of record collecting. Internally, we kind of talk about this collector's journey, like the record collector's journey. And I believe Kevin and Lloyd in the first installment here, it's spoken a lot about that.
Yep.
You can experience all aspects of record collecting and music discovery through this platform that these hundreds of thousands to millions of people have built upon over the 24 years of its existence. And that becomes incredibly powerful as a user of the platform. You've got this entire community that you're both pulling from and giving to
Mm-hmm.
by cataloging your collection, by adding things to your want list, by buying, by selling. You become, a person within that's keeping that thing alive.
Yeah.
And it's giving to you as much as you're putting into it in the end. And that seems kind of like this holistic, like Lion King kind of thing, but it's true in a sense that if this community of people that love this format, that are part of the vinyl culture, really just kind of built and built and built to this thing where it's like it's just become this kind of holistic thing that you can't get anywhere else. Like, Wikipedia or Pitchfork or eBay or rough trade site, like any of those things, that's a segment of
pieces. Yeah.
that's a little piece of the information that you need or the tool that you need to gain something, or to grab a record, or even your record store, your favorite record store. But Discogs really embraces all of that and gives it a singular home where you can partake in all of that and connect with the other humans that are in the same space that you are, as well.
How do you got one of the questions that always comes to mind when I'm thinking about Discogs, especially when you get into reviews of albums and things like, what is the I bet people would be curious because I am. What's the management like? How do you guys keep tabs on all of that with that many items and that many users? Like I'm assuming there's a team of people who kind of oversee that portion of the business.
We have a very busy community support team.
Community support. There you go.
You do.
I figured there was a name for it. Yeah, that's got to be a very busy team. Yes,
They are unheralded. The CS team, they are doing the work for sure. But look, Discogs is a very small company considering the size of others that are in our space and having thousands of employees. Like we have 100 plus, right? And from Kevin, our founder, all the way to the people on Jen and my team and the marketing team, stuff like that. We're all doing a lot. But yeah, it's the data side of it is overwhelming sometimes. Like, there's over 70 million items in our marketplace that's for sale. There's 70 million releases in the catalog. It's hundreds of thousands of contributors. It's hundreds of thousands of buyers, sellers, that kind of thing. And so, but that's all of the stuff that makes this such a beautiful platform, is that it all works together and it's all feeding each other. And, again, here for that singular purpose around that collector's journey that we were talking about.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I want to get into a little bit about, again, kind of full circle back to the beginning about you guys personally, because I think that I'm genuinely curious. Like, what are some records that you guys each can think of that you have a deep connection with, and why? Like, I love hearing people's stories behind the records. Jen, you mentioned it about how you can pull any record off and you know where you got it and that type of thing. So Jeff, do you have an example or two of records that pop to mind when you think about, oh man, yeah, I got a story with that?
Yeah, I pulled some records knowing that we were going to talk about this. Not sure Jen has too. I have this Francis and the Lights record. This one's very important because it has a song that was played at our wedding, and we had a DJ friend of ours that spun vinyl, and I was like, I didn't want to play it on a phone. So Steven over at Rough Trade in New York hooked me up with the guys over in London. They ended up finding me a copy of it. What I didn't know at the time is this thing's going for like a couple $100. So I didn't realize that, like, I was asking them to go above and beyond, but they were so kind. And found a copy for me and sent it to me. And so, that it means something not only because, of the wedding situation, but that there were a group of human beings that jumped in, that sprung into action, that didn't have to.
Yeah.
That found this thing for me and got it to me so quickly. And I love this record, but I'll never get rid of it just because of the effort that went into, bringing it to me for that occasion. What about you, Jen?
Yeah. I pulled a couple. It's funny. I actually had a really funny, not funny, but I had a Discogs moment with this record. So this record was actually a gift from a friend. I had a 33 and a third birthday party. So she got me this record by an artist named Doris Norton, who I'd never heard of, but she produced electronic music in the 80s, used the Apple computer to do so. And I love that this was made in Italy, and it actually has her phone number on the back, which is a real sign of the times. But the Discogs moment I had with this is that, I've just been sitting on this record. I've only listened to it a couple of times. And I was like, oh, I need to add this to my collection. And I discovered it's worth like $200. I'm quite certain my friend did not pay $200 for this. So that was a fun moment to have. But yeah, super cool. This was definitely a gift from somebody who knew me very well. So really personal.
It's funny, we've got the $200 record parade going on here.
Right?
Oh yeah, what do you got? You got something else? Because I was going to pull out this. I've got an original pressing of Q-Tip's Kamal the Abstract. Okay. VMP, Vinyl Me Please, just did a great repressing of this. I also have, and I listened to that one. But this one, I just went down a Q-Tip wormhole during the pandemic. I think there must have been 3 or 4 months where, when I was working out, I only had Q-Tip blasting in the gym, and found this original pressing at the local record shop, and got it home and realized that they'd sold it to me for like $30, and the thing was like going for much more than that. But it's the fact that, again, this record takes me to a specific moment of going, gym, couldn't go out in the world.
Sure.
Like, so now it's almost like a little traumatizing.
It's the COVID album. We all have them. Right. I had this conversation with people because there are albums that you put them on and it takes you right there, whether it was that event or other events.
Yeah. And so on the flip side of this, there is not a happier song to me. There's a song called "This Is How You Feel" by the Preachers, and they're an Australian, like, kind of indie pop band. They were together for a very short time. I don't think they exist anymore. But again, that song in particular brings me so much joy. So when it comes in, like, on a Spotify playlist or something like that, it's almost like I'm like, run to this record to put it on, to listen to the whole damn thing. Because it speaks to something specific for me, but it's like, also, every time I bring that song up or bring this record up, no one knows who it is.
Yeah.
Right. And then I get that little spark of joy as well, of introducing.
That's the pride and joy.
Yeah. It was like, and it's not even that, like, thing, well, I know this band or you don't. It's like the sharing of it and turning someone on to something new is really special. It's like a lot of fun.
What else did you have, Jen?
Oh, I was just going to pull out a not valuable but really awesome record.
Yeah, do it.
We all love those too.
Yeah, I think this really expresses a moment in time when I was willing to just buy a record I'd never heard before, which is really different now in the streaming age. But I was on this gypsy jazz swing kick for a hot minute at one point in time, specifically inspired by Django Reinhardt and Stefan Grappelli. And so I saw this record that was like hot swing fiddle classics. And I was like, sure, I'll pick it up. And it's so good. It's really, really good. And it is really, I don't know if you can see the $8 price tag on it. I think this is like a median value of like 450 on Discogs or something. But who cares, because it's so great. And I think that kind of roulette or randomness of walking into a record store is something that people always love, right? And there's
It is.
ways, it's interesting too to hear how people do that on Discogs, how they kind of are willing to just, order some extra things that look interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah, the flipping through bins and kind of being intrigued and just taking a gamble. This represents that part of my collection. So.
Yeah, I
I
do
love
think it's
that.
important to say here, GI, though, that, it's like the price tag or like, how much something's worth on Discogs doesn't matter. It's like
No.
some of my favorite records you can get for $10 still, and they're amazing, and
Mhm.
it's worth how much you think it's worth. So,
It's
there's
true. It
there
really
are
is.
records that I have that are super expensive, super cheap, and I would not get rid of them for any amount of money because I can't live without them.
Yeah, I talk about value a lot on the YouTube channel, and it's one of those divisive conversations because a lot of people immediately equate value to monetary, and it's like there's a
Yeah,
lot more going on there for most collectors. I
Mhm.
mean, there's a certain type of collector I think these days there can be that are
yeah,
really looking at that because they have that mentality. But I think most record collectors who are in this for the music, they're in this for the right reasons, which to
yep,
me stems from like, what does this record mean to you and why are you willing to commit to it? And how would you describe it to a friend? Those types of things. That's where all the value comes for, I think, most
yeah.
people.
Look, it's still fun to like look at the value of your record collection in the app.
Sure.
The app in and of itself is fun, even with like the shake your Discogs feature where it pulls up random records
Yeah,
and
yeah.
stuff
The
like
true
that.
shuffle. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's fun, but it's also like I was just in a conversation with another record collector. It's a huge collector, and it's like just pulled up the app and showed me the value of his collection. It was something like $400,000 or something crazy like that. And I was like, wow, you could buy like two houses in Louisville for that. He's like our one in Seattle, and I'm like, well, maybe a half of one in Seattle. But that's all part of the discovery piece too. It's just like, learning how valuable your music is and things like that. That's fun. But still, yeah, it's like, look, the story that Jen told about that last record like made me laugh because I never thought like gypsy fiddle music would be something that Jen would pull out. And so again, it's like I've learned something about her
You've learned something new.
curiosity
Yeah.
through this. And that again is special that you can connect with other people through conversation about the records that they have.
Yeah, I love the that moment when someone comes over and they see your record collector and they're gonna hang out and you're like, yeah, pick something out. And like they're like, oh my God, I don't even know where to start, that type of thing. That's where that shake feature can come in handy really good. You're like, well,
Yeah.
here, look at it on the app, shake it, and then you can chase it down, like that type of thing, which is really cool. Um, it's always it's always fun to introduce the physical media in any form, especially records, to someone who is kind of a novice to the idea of it, and I think again that's why a lot of and I think that plays into the idea of a lot of people starting to get into this hobby because they see it and they're like, what is this? The curiosity factor is really big, whether they're walking through a Target or they see a local record store, whatever it may be. And again, having Discogs as that utility to at least understand what you own as a starting point is really, really big. I know for a lot of people. Well, this has been great. I love learning about you guys because I don't know you that well, but it's great to get a little insight here and there, which is again what you can learn about someone from the record collection, which really speaks to the conversation because forming a deeper connection with your collection can be done in a lot of ways. And for me, having Discogs in my pocket at all times and using it on not only a daily basis, but an hourly basis as a record store owner, it just, again, I said at the beginning, it acts as a lifeline and it's a great tool to be able to educate myself and educate my customers. And I know that you guys from a marketing standpoint feel the same way.
Yeah, for sure. And it's like another thing I've learned today is that we all like the color black a lot. So there's that. I feel like
Yeah.
I've I feel like I've learned something about everyone here. Yeah, and G, I thank you so much for the time. I do. I feel like I learned something new about gin today, which is great. And yeah, it's like it's been a lot of fun talking about records with you today.
Awesome. Likewise. Well, we'll be back again with another episode of the Discogs Insider. Hope everyone enjoyed it. My name is G.I. Sanders. Thank you again, Jeffrey and Jen from Discogs, for joining us, and we'll see you next time.